When I do that in a class is people start saying things that they had never really said to connect, but someone might say, oh, this person met me at the beginning of the semester and I felt like they made me feel comfortable by just doing these things. And it creates like an emotional like bonding that happens by asking people to step into that kind of appreciation, aha.
As leaders, we're talking about valuing contributions from others and understanding it. And leadership is to lead, right? Leading others. And that word itself puts us in, and I like that we can go and say, you know what? I don't have to be the person who takes all the responsibility. It's shared. We work together and we all have roles, not to, dismiss that fact. We're working together and collaborating. And when challenges happen, how can a leader or team members get to know one another in a workplace? So let me just even go back and say a new employee comes into a group. Everyone's already friends and they know the work cycle, and onboarding plays a huge role, but it doesn't sometimes meet the need of this new individual who needs significance and belonging, and they come into a workplace. What are some of the ways that they can feel like they belong, they can contribute in a meaningful way without it taking so long? Because that discouragement, when it sets in, it's hard to then go to encouragement. So two-part question: how can we make someone feel welcomed and bring them to have significance and belonging and not wait so long? And if they do become discouraged, how can we as a team encourage someone who is just so discouraged and given up on themselves?
It's a great question. And in the workplace settings that I've been in, I feel like I've been fortunate to have a lot of socially interested people. So that term coming from Adler, where there are so essentially people who have this desire to contribute and to show interests in other people's interests and connect with others and help create a sense of belonging for themselves and other people. I've really had that, I think, part of the personalities of some of the and the lifestyles of people that I've worked around. So for me, some of the ways that I've seen that be influenced by leadership of people that I've worked with would be that they maybe make some cultural efforts to somehow like do team building while also integrating a new person in. Like one thing's at the college counseling center that I worked at, I've seen like one thing we've done would be like having an onboarding process where there's maybe like a meal where we got to like maybe have like breakfast together, all at work, where we would literally like spend an hour together and just like people might like talk about like some funny stories about themselves or the office and like to try to make it comfortable for the new person. So a lot of times like we would try to do things around food and activities that were maybe designed to be light, like rather than like us being in the role of like doctor so-and-so and being in the supervisor of that person and the boss is there. Like, it's like we would try to remove all of that and get more on this equal horizontal level where everyone is like, we're just people showing up and we happen to work together. And, there may be boundaries in what's disclosed there, but there's like some level of like trying to connect with people on a person to person level. So I would say like that's where culture may influence, like the work culture and the culture maybe of like the setting that the country or the state or wherever we live in the world might influence that too. For me, I think the way I tried to do that as like an employee seeing new people coming in is personally like making efforts, whether I was like a supervisor or like in a role, like a leadership role or not, I think in both roles, I would try to like check in with the person too, to like, as they were maybe onboarding or joining a community or a workspace. So I think that there's often personalities who have that desire to connect, who may be the people who also kind of make themselves known as the people who are like concerned about the well-being of these new people. So I think that may naturally happen. And then if you don't have a lot of people who have a lot of social interest, then there may be one or two people who kind of fill in that role. But I do think those dynamics, if there's social interest coming from the leaders and that's modeled by the leaders, I think you also see that happening in the employees too, where they see that happening and like, hey, this is a value about like taking care and trying to make people feel at home, or that they like that they're happy to have them there, versus like a competitive environment where it's like, okay, well, we're going to like, we don't want to connect you too much because we're competing with you for the whatever raise or outcome. So I think it's like, how do leaders bring in some sense of like not competition, but cooperation? Those are some examples, because I could probably talk about that all day, but I don't know if that gives a little bit of a picture.
It gives a lot of a better picture for us, because as sometimes I know personally, you do onboarding and you do invite everyone together and their personality, their own beliefs about social gatherings or whatever that might be. They're coming. I know that some employees, when I had operated schools, was the new employee. They're just so nervous about doing the right thing, and they might show up as overwhelmed or confused, and we begin to think, wow, are they either confused or maybe did we hire wrong? And then giving that space and time before making those decisions, looking just that empathy part of it. And what is it that we can do to connect? And I love the idea of having a meal and just breaking down the barriers, because I think we, the leaders, sometimes forget that the belief about leaders out there, or bosses, can influence how they feel about coming into work and how they feel about our interactions with them. And as leaders, when we say something, plays such a heavy role for many people. So just sort of understanding that aspect comes through to the conversation you had. I want to talk about community and building a community. Dr. Adler speaks about that social interest, the Gemeinschaftsgefühl, and maybe you can explain that word and how that fits into a workplace.
I was like thinking exactly the same path of your question as we're talking about that example. And I just have seen like the supervisors or bosses or associate deans or directors or people that I've worked with. I feel like I've just had such luck finding jobs where the values of those leaders were very Adlerian, but though people didn't even realize that their values were very in line with Adlerian psychology. So what I mean by that is that I'm thinking of some of the leadership people that I've been like working under or working with, is they saw it more about we're working with each other, that they had a sense of community, that they didn't value competition, that they valued connection and they valued community. And that might look like, for me at the university at the end of the semester, that might look like that people in leadership value like, hey, should we all get together and kind of celebrate our efforts this year? As opposed to like not thinking about that and being so busy at the end of the semester. I think of like clinical directors and counseling jobs where we would do things at the end of the semester to like take care of each other and ourselves. Like we might go on like a cruise, like a short, like half day cruise that's very inexpensive, and just like kind of decompress together, and that they would make space and value that. Like, so they would value sort of community care and the values around self-care in the workplace, and like that we do things to have fun. Like, so one of the things that I like to do in some of those workspaces is like, I've been a drummer for many years, but I would always like volunteer my like social interest services to others. So I like to do a lot of group drumming. And I know that not everyone is a drummer or a musician, but I would try to like do it in a way where I'm like, hey, this is for people who aren't musicians, and we're just going to like have fun and get people laughing, and it's really light. And then therefore people don't feel like they need to like perform or like be a professional musician, which they're not. So for me, a lot of times at the end of the year or the end of a quarter or whatever it may be in the workplace setting, we might try to do some group drumming as like a debriefing activity where we just like totally don't even talk about work or problems or work tasks. And we just like do this way of like connecting with each other through music. I've done that many times for different like workspaces, and it's always been very fun because we just get to like step into like a child's mind of like playfulness and creativity, and out of like this, maybe the serious, like we have to grade papers or do therapy or whatever our tasks are in the workplace. So for me, that's one effort when you have people who like can bring in something that taps into community. One thing I like to do at the end of my classes towards the end of the semester is like a community building activity. And I just learned this reading it is that a book, and I don't have a reference where I read it, but you could change this in any concept. This could be like at a workplace meeting where we take 15, 20 minutes to do something like this, and you can pick from one of the three. It could be an appreciation for someone. It could be an apology to someone or to everyone. Or it could be an aha, like something I learned about myself or that I learned in the workplace or in the class that really stood out to me. And a lot of people have a tendency to gravitate toward the appreciation. And what happens when I do that in a class is people start saying things that they had never really said to connect, but someone might say, oh, this person met me at the beginning of the semester and I felt like they made me feel comfortable by just doing these things. And it creates like an emotional like bonding that happens by asking people to step into that kind of appreciation, aha, apology. And sometimes the apologies can be funny too, where people might say, sorry, my cell phone kept going off, or like, I'm sorry, I did this thing that made people's lives a little difficult. But by doing something like that, I think it allows the community sense to grow. It allows us to learn about our impact on each other. And it can just take like some of our workplace meetings or a classroom setting and bond us even further. So those are like some examples of, I think, like when you pull in activities that somehow get us to step outside of our like serious part of our like adult personalities where we have to like work or solve problems or deliver what our deliverables are in the workplace. This like sometimes can be really useful to like how a leader that values those types of discussions, community-based activities.
If you like the content of this video, please don't forget to follow. And also, if you want more information, visit the website, Yogi Patel, TTE.com.